Hey there everybody, it's Betsy from Story Drawing Skills. I saw this video, You Should Make a Webcomic by Super Death Show, and was totally convinced that I need to make a webcomic. I decided to make 100 panels from scratch in 6 months. That's the goal. At the time this video is recorded, there are 61 days left, and by the time this video has finished, there will still be 80 panels left to go. And it doesn't take a mathematical genius to figure out that I'm really falling behind schedule, like really falling behind, to the point that I have to finish more than one panel per day. And I can tell you right now that is not happening. So what's interesting is that usually if I'm in this kind of position, the first thing I want to do is quit. And it's that failure mentality of if I'm failing, then what's the point of continuing on? Because obviously if I'm not going to make my goal, then what, like why am I doing it? I've done this many times before with my goal setting, where I'll say like, okay, if I do, XYZ for 30 days straight, then I get a reward. Well, of course I miss a day. And then it's like, well, there's, it might be like day 5, right? Like walk the dog every day. And then on day 5, I miss it and I don't walk the dog. And now it's like, well, I can't possibly do 30 days in a row this month because the month only has 30 days and I have just missed the 5th one. So then the reward is just like an aching reminder that I failed, like I can't do it. And I'm known to fail quite easily at other things. Or rather, I should say I'm known to give up very easily once there's no chance of getting the reward or getting the goal. So, a prime example, a very recent example of this is this past Inktober. I made it to day 2, just barely. I think day 2 I posted at like 11:45 at night or something like that, ridiculous. And after I had missed maybe the next 3 days, I was ready to just call it quits. I'm just like, nope, not going to catch up. What's the point? And did not finish. Oh, side note here. Why did I get rid of that panel? Because I have mentioned in previous videos that Socorro just didn't look like herself. She didn't look like she was on model, and I couldn't figure out why. And I didn't really have time to figure out why. And I thought, well, you can tell she's looking around just from those first 2 panels. So why bother having that 3rd if the art is weak in that 3rd panel and it just brings the rest of it down by being the weak link, So even though it puts me farther behind schedule, further behind schedule, I think farther you're only supposed to use with actual distance. So anyway, it puts me behind. It puts me even more behind than I was. It felt right for the story, so that's why I decided just to take it out. So back to Inktober that I gave up on. Because this year's Inktober didn't have the right mindset from the get-go, I think it was more easy to give up. Because jumping back to 2016, that Inktober was awesome. That was the best Inktober of my life. It was the first time that I completed it. Or I think I did 30 days. I think I missed 1 day. But it was so fun, and I just was so happy that I actually got through to the end of the month. And that one was very easy to stick with because I had a real emotional attachment to the characters I was doing. I did like a little fan comic, like a little Pokemon fan comic, a boy and his Bulbasaur kind of thing. And it was an idea that I wanted to explore, and I was, excited to have Inktober help me do that. And I was real keen on learning how to use the Kuretake disposable pens, because they have like a brush tip that is just the right amount of firmness and flexibility for me. And I was actually, getting better at it. Like I could see and I could feel the difference that once I was doing this inking every day, I got a feel for the pens, and I liked how there's something about traditional inking that is really difficult to replicate digitally. And I was starting to get that kind of handcrafted charm that goes along with inking traditionally. And, I wasn't sucking as much, let's say. So that was all good stuff. But this year, I was thinking primarily because I'm making one really big push to be more present online. You know, I mean, even though I had one class in art school about how you should really just post your work all the time on the internet so that people can find it and like it and, you know, support you as an artist, I still shy away from that. So I was going to use this Inktober of 2017 primarily just to get my Instagram more active again and to have something to post there. And, you know, I was trying too hard to make a friend type of a thing where it's just like, yeah, I'll just make some art that will be so great that it will get me some more followers, you know. And I'm sure that can be a positive side effect to doing Inktober, but if that's your only reason, like that was my only reason, it's sure to fail you, like really quickly. And, yeah, it wasn't enough to keep me going after I failed on day 3. So, my point being, I promise there was a point to this, that it's easy to give up on things that aren't giving you anything that will last past the goal's deadline. Like, I felt if I had done Inktober all the way to the 31st, I had no use for the inking skills right now because I'm doing everything digitally. It didn't really help me, and also my Kurotake pens have run dry since last year because I used them up so much. And I had been trying to just sort of get by with whatever I had at hand, and I wasn't feeling very motivated to try to improve my inking skills, so that was kind of out the window. And again, like, Jake Parker made Inktober with the intention that you want to get better at inking. I know it's been kind of twisted as it gets more and more popular and people are using it as, you know, a social media tactic, and they are using it as, you know, just kind of that thing you do once a year and then they never ink again, which is fine. You know, people can use it for whatever they want. But looking back at his original intention that he just wanted to get better at something and this was his way of doing it, it made me realize that the reason I'm so dedicated to this comic is because I want the long-term skills that are going to come along with it. And I can already feel them building up because when I'm drawing pages now, even compared to the first page, or the first couple of panels, I should say, that I drew for this comic, you could see that there were a lot of times that I had to completely change poses, completely change characters' angles. There was a lot that I just didn't see during the first time, and it wasn't until later I'm like, oh gosh, why is her back to the camera? This doesn't make sense. And then I had to totally redo it. And now I'm finding that happens less because I'm thinking about it more like shooting a movie and less like comic panels that are just separate from one another. So I want that, you know, continuity to keep going as if you were watching this, and that's really helping me and something I just wouldn't have been able to practice unless I actually did a comic. And so that was the first thing I noticed, is that it's getting much, much easier to compose my panels, and I'm not having to go back and change completely everything anymore. I do still change things. Obviously, here's a case where at first she was doing a 3/4 view looking out to the distance, but I thought since we just ended with a 3/4 view, it was a little redundant. So then I changed it to looking straight ahead. And I'm not sure it made that much difference, but it was enough that I wanted to do it. So, you know, I have things that I'll change from like these very early doodle thumbnail stages to a more developed pencil stage, but nothing to the extent that I was doing on panel 2 and 3 and 4. So seeing that develop and just having my compositional sense get a little tighter in such a short amount of time. It's only, you know, 20 panels. It's not been like 200 panels. That's, you know, I think pretty good to get, you know, that kind of result so early. And along with the ability to compose my shots a little better, I'm also developing a much stronger sense of where I need to spend my time and my energy. Before, I think I would have just treated each panel equally and would have tried to put, my best effort into every single panel. And you can't do that on a deadline as tight as this one, I've come to find out. And it's made me much more aware of how to most effectively use what I have. And it makes me think of, if I dare to compare myself to Pixar, it makes me think of them in those early years when they knew that they could not, make lifelike hair. They couldn't make lifelike clothing, really. I mean, they had, these huge limitations on what they could do. And instead of trying to wait until they got better at it or had the machines capable of doing it, they made things like Toy Story, where they knew the plasticky look of that older computer-generated effects and graphics would lend itself to a story about plastic characters. I mean, it's brilliant if you think about it, where you just take what you do have and find which story matches that. So I'm kind of applying that to my panels. You'll notice that I spent way more time on making the first panel bigger, for one, and for putting in, more rocks, more background, more water effects, more just everything. It took a lot more time. And these other panels that are just kind of like connecting the dots aren't as, I don't want to say like amazing, but there's not as much effort in them. And I used to think that was like awful. Like, how dare you call yourself a comic book artist if you're not going to put an equal amount of effort in each and every single panel? And if you have the time and skill and resources and ability to do that, then you're amazing, right? I mean, Lackadaisy is one that I think everybody would aspire to do art like Tracy Butler. And I'm sure there's, plenty more in other comics that I haven't read. But I'm finding that, okay, if I only have a certain amount of time and energy that I can put into this comic, then I need to put it in the right places. And I'm no longer hung up on simplifying the other panels, which has been really helpful. And I had been aware of this balancing of time and energy and resources from a very young age. I can remember watching cartoons, when I was 8 years old, 10 years old, whatever it was. And it was really obvious to see when animation was bad or when it was, made in a hurry. It was the flapping mouths and people just like standing still for a long time, before anything happened. Or knowing that the animation was reused for their walk cycles and for their run cycles and stuff like that. And whenever there was a moment that had really good animation, or if there was like a particularly nice fight scene or something like that, my siblings and I would always joke like, oh, that's the money shot. That's where all the money went, right into those few seconds. And I'm not sure where we even picked that up, money shot, but we were very much aware of it. And it was very easy to see when the animation company had decided to put most of its resources into, one part of that episode. And for the longest time, I thought that was only something that applied to companies, actual animation companies or comic book companies or whatever it is, because they had the responsibility, or at least they should think they have the responsibility, to balance themselves in a way that they can keep everyone employed, that they can keep paying everybody, that they can keep making enough profit to, have a healthy company. And I never thought it applied to independent artists, because I think we have this sort of myth that because we're independent, we can do whatever we want. And that's true to some extent, but it's kind of like saying, I am free to run a marathon tomorrow. And anybody who has seen me in real life knows that I'm not in very good shape. And so I would probably try to run this marathon by sprinting as fast as I could at the beginning, not realizing that I had to pace myself if I wanted to get to the finish line, like within the day. And that's what happened to me a couple of times with a couple of projects that I was, ready to just start drawing every day and start doing it and, start making it, and this is going to be awesome and blah, blah, blah. And then within like a week, I'm burnt out. And so finding how to pace myself and how to decide which panels are worth the extra time and which ones need to be cut, it's getting really easy to do. And I'm so happy because, indecision has been one of my greatest enemies all of my entire life. So having that skill develop, I know it's not going to go away as soon as the year ends and my goal is done. So that's awesome. I'm also getting to like my characters quite a bit more than I started out with because, not gonna lie, at first they were really like awkward to try to be around. I don't know how to phrase this. I'm gonna just say like they're real people, right? And it's like you don't really know them that well. You're not sure how they're going to respond to any kind of, topic that you bring up or any situation that comes up. And I think what makes people comfortable with one another is that you tend to know what your friends like. You tend to know what might make them mad or sad or happy. And so there's that nice expectation that you know how they're going to react. And when you don't know your characters well and you don't know how they're going to react, it's very awkward and it's very uncomfortable. At least it is for me. So when, I first started with panel 1, I really had no sense of what to expect in their speech, in their thought process, and their decision making. And as I've gotten to panel 20, I'm finding that, number one, I have to tell my sister that yes, she was right, because I am finding that there's a piece of me in each of these characters. Whether it's something I don't like about myself, or something I do like about myself, or something I wish I had more of, one of those aspects is in each of my characters, in Socorro, Kes, and Clarice. And so with that familiarity set, it's much easier to think how they're going to react in certain situations. And right now I'm kind of at a crossroads with the story where I have to decide if I'm going to include as big a chunk of character development as I originally intended to put in this story. Because I personally really enjoy a story that has an equal amount of just kind of on the edge of your seat awesomeness, car chases and fight scenes and, plot twists and whatever, but also the characters, relationships, not only getting stronger, but making them better people. And so I didn't know if I had like the time and the resources to make that happen this time or not. But that will have to wait for a future video because I am out of footage, and so I should wrap this topic up. In fact, I think I wandered quite a bit, so I'm going to summarize what I believe is the differentiating factor between me so easily giving in to my failure mentality for Inktober and not so with my webcomic is that I am already seeing the long-term changes for the better that I am getting through this project. So I can tell that I'm better at doing my storytelling composition, that I'm making decisions more quickly and more efficiently, and also that I'm learning how to gauge how much time and resources I have for a particular part of my comic, which are skills that are going to last far into the future past my deadline, and that's why it's worthwhile to keep going even if I don't make my 100 panel goal by the end of the year. One last note before I go, thank you so much to my patrons on Patreon for supporting the making of these videos. You are so appreciated. And if you want to go check out my Patreon page, the link is in the description below. So that's it for this week, and I will be back next week.